SCP-8888 8 Ball Part 1. Heist fiction is a rather enjoyable genre for a good number of reasons. People typically like to see extremely competent characters doing what they do best, even when things go awry, and in a good heist, something always goes awry. In films such as Ocean's 11 and Mission Impossible, a team of individuals with differing personalities come together to pull off one big job, and often, even though theft is usually in the domain of villains, they're doing it for a good reason. In the SCP universe, we've looked at loads of different articles covering all sorts of different genres, but what I think we really need is a good heist, and SCP-8888 just might be the ticket. Let's take a look. We begin by being provided with 5 footage transcripts and 1 image that are being attached to the 8888 file and placed in chronological order. The first is from a camera on the southwest perimeter watchtower of Site-15, showing dense, moonlit woods in the distance, shrouded in fog. The camera then pans upwards, showing Site-15's Faraday hex field, a shimmering golden bubble of quarantined energy resting atop an angular expanse of brick and paved stone. Within it, a monolithic cylindrical facility towers above the forest, with its uppermost level rotating continuously, revealing an intense orange spotlight boring through the fog. The spotlight scans the forest, growing steadily brighter as it approaches the camera, and the view fades to white. The image we're provided is from this scene, showing the immense lighthouse above the treetops. The second piece of footage is from the Hexfield Maintenance Access Tunnel, and on the wall, a red indicator diode begins flashing, illuminating a maintenance panel below that reads, IntelliWard Access. 5 minutes go by, until lamplight shines down the tunnel, and 2 technicians wearing protective HexMat suits step into view, their faces obscured by visors. The first bears a large, amber headlamp, while the second is much taller and heavy-set, carrying a cylindrical black case framed in telecillium bronze alloy. With some effort, they heft it onto a nearby workbench, revealing an ornate gold insignia shimmering in the ambient light as the case clicks unlocked. The lankier of the 2 technicians opens the maintenance panel and looks inside, before procuring a set of large metal tongs from their tool belt and carefully reaching in. Moments later, they retrieve a charred gray cube from the wall, which fizzles and visually distorts, deforming into other polyhedra, phasing partially through the tongs, but remaining held in place. The case is opened, revealing 2 spherical cages, one empty and one containing another translucent cube filled with a rolling cloud of iridescent particles. The gray cube is gingerly dropped into the empty cage, where it thrashes against an invisible barrier. The technician then uses the tongs to extract the clear cube and install it within the panel. The indicator diode ceases flashing, and the technicians share a thumbs up through Vanta rubber gloves. Later, in a residence wing at Site-15, a camera shows a faux painting to the right of the entrance doorway depicting dogs playing pool, and to the left, a wall-mounted whiteboard displaying the schedule for the Commons Rec Room, indicating its current reservation by one Professor K.P. Crow. The camera pans to the left, settling on a view of the Commons pool table, beset on opposite sides by a thin, middle-aged man in a blue suit and a golden retriever wearing boxy glasses. The latter's cue stick is riddled with heavy bite marks. A shiny black orb rolls to a gradual stop in the table's center, obscuring an angular gold insignia beneath. The 8 ball is alone on the table, and a muffled thud indicates the pocketing of another ball. The suited man smirks, retrieving the cue ball from the table's return and gently positioning it at the far end of the table as the retriever whimpers in dismay. The man sneers and says that it's not his fault that the dog can't see red on green as he lines up his cue. He presses a concealed button on the stick, and seconds later he makes his shot, sending the cue ball whizzing about at an unnatural angle and speed. It bounces many times, nearly missing several pockets and slowing down considerably. When it finally approaches the center, it contacts the 8-ball with just enough force to barely send it over the edge of the felt into the pocket. Synthesized fanfare then sounds, and a green hue illuminates the man, who smirks with pride as the dog begins to bark in complaint. The camera pans back to the right, following the man as he walks to the far wall to store his cue in a private locker. He quips to Professor Crow to put it into the site's donation fund before strolling out into the hall. Later, in the site's administrative wing, a camera pans to show an ornate mahogany door bearing a gold plaque engraved with the words, Director's Quarters. The reflection in the plaque shows the camera, which is disguised as a peephole embedded into a similar-looking door, whose plaque reads, Redacted. An elevator ding is then heard from off-screen, and footsteps approach, showing the blue-suited man from before, who glances at the plaque above the camera before looking down each hallway and reaching into his back pocket. He produces a sleek, black SCP Foundation ID card and holds it to a scanner beneath the camera, which identifies him as Ryoto Heikaku, Senior AI Systems Researcher and current Director of Site-15. The card's clearance field is modified with several illicit symbols, which the scanner spends several moments parsing. Eventually, a short chime plays, and the door opens. Director Heikaku shoves his way in, causing the camera to pan to show the room as a luxurious penthouse suite with an open floor plan, dark black walls, and gold-accented decor. He steps inside with a sigh of relief, removing his suit jacket and hanging it behind the door. He then closes the door and locks it. The last bit of footage we get is from the same room, but this time from a camera on the balcony. Heikaku steps out from the room wearing a blue bathing suit and earpiece, carrying a towel, a whiskey glass, and an hourglass-shaped liquor bottle. He shivers in the cool night air, but heads over to the balcony's hot tub, gingerly descending into the water. He spends several minutes getting comfortable, then pours himself a drink, takes a deep breath, and presses a button on his earpiece. He tells someone named Lex that it's time for the nightly, and asks if the stalking operation on the Maxwellis went through. Lex turns out to be the artificially intelligent conscript Alexandra.aic, who exclaims that the network says that Heikaku is still on site, but it can't see him. Heikaku glances towards the cameras on the balcony and says not to worry about that, repeating his question. Alexandra, however, replies that they've been trying to contact him as there's been a breach. Site-15 is observing Eki status protocols in full. Heikaku sits up, reaching over to close the liquor bottle, and exclaims, asking what the hell kind of breach would make them do that. Alexandra replies that it wasn't their call, as it was done by O5 order. Someone has stolen SCP-8888. The document then informs us that the requested file for 8888 could only be partially retrieved, as much of its content is remanded to Site-15's encrypted Pan-Octagon servers. Since SCP-8888 is unavailable at this time, an AI conscript is attempting rudimentary decryption of these documents. It then reports that the decryption is complete, and all the file contents were retrieved, but the order of the content is lost, along with some metadata. The file on SCP-8888 then is disordered and does not reflect standard documentation practices. With that, however, we're finally given access to SCP-8888. SCP-8888 is a Level 5 Radix class anomaly, meaning that it is not meant to be contained and is rather integrated into the Foundation's command structure. It has the secondary class of Vault, and the containment procedures state fairly simply that SCP-8888 must not be stolen, which makes this turn of events quite unfortunate. We're not given the description just yet for what it is, but we're told that 8888 subjects reality to some converse containment procedures. The technobabble is pretty high here, but 8888, its converse methodologies, and all assigned personnel are remanded to Info Electronics Site 15, and reality must be isolated from 8888, with this isolation only being interrupted when 8888 invokes itself, as per the Divinate protocol. 8888 interfaces with the 8-Ball database, a dedicated, enigmatically encrypted server accessible only to 052 and an AI conscript. To secure itself and Site-15, 8888 has designed, maintained, and routinely iterated upon Site-15's Faraday hex field, which obstructs incoming thaumic workings and other occult interventions, in addition to electromagnetic data. Lastly, 8888 maintains Converse Containment Vault 8888, also known as the Panoctagon, the innermost layer of which represents an ectoentropic barrier between reality and an embedded octo-orthogonal space, casually isolating itself from consensus reality. In other words, SCP-8888 is really secure, being isolated from reality itself, all in an effort to prevent it from being stolen. There's more technobabble here, with terms like hex wall, esoteric quanta, achromatic dissipation, paranatural safeguards, tantalum hafnium carbide, tachyonic displacement fields, and so on. But really, let's just stick with the idea that this thing is pretty secure. 8888 regularly reports on the effectiveness of the above security measures, then analyzes its own report and appends another report regarding its confidence in its findings. To verify its confidence report, 8888 generates attack data on violating its own security measures, and then processes that to ensure its own findings. Any hypothetical contrary result is then immediately reported to 052 via the 8-Ball database. In order to eliminate any potential security risk, which shouldn't even exist at all, any number of hypothetical security layers that may be in use are not even mentioned here, and are omitted from all relevant documentation. It's hard to emphasize any more on how secure this thing is, and subsequently how much the Foundation doesn't want this thing stolen. In the Overseer Council chambers at Site-01, Heikaku exits the final of 8 airlocks and emerges into a fluorescence-drenched boardroom featuring a large, scalloped table in the form of a hollow tetradecagon with the 14th edge omitted. Without prompting, he steps through this space to stand in the central space, as 13 silhouettes, black despite the omnipresent lighting, scrutinize him without comment for nearly 1 minute. The surface of the table glows softly at its head, and 051's silhouette brightens slightly as he welcomes Ryoto. Heikaku clears his throat twice and steps forward, thanking them for meeting him on such short notice. He's cut off, however, as 051 says that now that the pleasantries are finished, he should justify his retention as director of Site-15 in no more than 2 sentences. Heikaku opens his mouth as his hands begin to shake, and he's silent for several seconds, causing 051 to say that that's very good, as many waste their first sentence on protests. Heikaku speaks again, saying that as overseer of the facility in which SCP-8888 was stored, but he's cut off again by 057, who remarks on him calling himself an overseer. 051 raises his hand and says to allow him his mandated latitude before they get into that. Heikaku looks back and forth before attempting his defense a second time. He tells them that he is clearly responsible for the personnel whose actions allowed the device's removal from containment, but he remains the best candidate for supervising Site-15, and given his familiarity with the object, he will be indispensable for any and all retrieval efforts. 059 scoffs that he's in no position to make that claim, and 0513 says that this council is prepared to vote on his future with the SCP Foundation. But before he can state the likeliest outcome, 053 interrupts to say that that should not be discussed with the accused in advance. 0513 agrees and says that Heikaku must be aware that many in this room are very, very displeased with his performance. 052 then whirs to life, and a stack of 3 cylinders in its position rotates until a single point of orange light fixates on Heikaku. It speaks with a flat tone and states that while this failure was inevitable, it is nevertheless his failure. Others will assess his culpability. Its purpose here is to attempt redress. The whirring increases in pitch, and an invisible holographic emitter in the floor sparks to life. Heikaku stumbles back, nearly falling over, as SCP-8888 is displayed in the space where he was standing, rotating serenely. 052 continues, stating that this device is the origin point for all sustainable artificial intelligence technology employed by the SCP Foundation. It is the origin point for all sustainable artificial intelligence technology known to exist, and it is 052's source. It is also the source of Heikaku's position's prestige. Should he survive his imminent audit, the recovery of the latter will be contingent on its recovery. With the 18.2% chance exception of this archivist, SCP-8888 is the O5's definitive tool for precise and responsive consultation. Without it, they are in the dark. Axiomatically, this is where they die. 052 asks him if the gravity of the situation has been impressed upon him by this humanistic analogy, and Heikaku nods. It then tells him that he has been granted a 24-hour grace period for this task, and Heikaku thanks them for their generosity before being interrupted by 051, who says that this refers to the 24 hours which have already elapsed since the theft, and they are prepared to hear his report. Heikaku begins fumbling in his suit with a sheaf of papers, stuttering, saying that it's been a long day, and he's had his best people on it. 058, however, remarks that he has nothing, and after all the chances and resources he's given him, to say he's disappointed would be more than an understatement. 052 drones that SCP-8888 must be recovered, and this error must be corrected. Heikaku nods manically and says that he is fully prepared to cooperate with all efforts to eventuate that, but the others remark that he has no plan, and they didn't really expect him to have one, even though it would have been nice, given the gravity of his duties. 054 says that happily they have more than one professional mess solver on hand, but Heikaku chimes in, yelling that he's got leads. They're considering suspects, and they've got credible evidence pointing to an MC&D retrieval team. Barnes from Site-19 is insisting that this has all the hallmarks of a Group of Interest 727 operation, the House of Stars, and Heikaku has been on the horn with Goldbaker Rhines, the Foundation's lawyers. Their policy covering SCP-8888 was negotiated by 8888 itself, and there's 2 payout options. Either 1 million Tartarian Principality dollars in non-fungible artificial souls, or elite tier access to their own predictive systems. 059 scoffs again at the idea of passing their most sensitive queries through their all-seeing insurance agents. Heikaku wonders why 8888 considered 1 million artificial souls to be equivalent recompense, but he's interrupted again by 052, who states that the Emergent Threat Tactical Response Authority's envoy is waiting in the inner airlock, and has been privy to this discussion. He's allowed in, and Heikaku turns to see Dr. Daniil Sokolsky, Deputy Director of ETRA. He brushes past Heikaku without seeming to notice him, and comments that he would have characterized this as more of an excoriation. 051 smiles and says that he was expecting Dr. Daniels, but Sokolsky just shrugs, replying that Dan's a planner, but plans are how you don't get things stolen. Failing that, emphasizing the fail syllable with a smirk, what you want next is a scheme. 051 nods and asks how soon he can develop a contingency for this situation, to which Sokolsky just says that about 5 years ago. The question occupied an evening when he couldn't get to his lab during a containment breach, nudging Heikaku, and it shouldn't take him more than an hour to update it. He's already got a team mostly picked out, and they've even got a name. Heikaku snorts, asking him if he made a preemptive plan to steal 8888 back, and Sokolsky just glances at him, replying that he made one as soon as he heard who was looking after it. 059 says that they will have an additional team member to suggest, and he will find them indispensable for executing his chosen strategy. 051 glances around the room and nods, saying to introduce Director Heikaku to his interlocutor and remove him from the chambers. The matter of his disposition can wait until after Dr. Sokolsky has briefed them on his scheme in full. The red right-hand escort promptly approaches Heikaku, who is attempting to formulate an objection as the airlock doors open again. He is firmly steered to face the newcomer, Dr. Jeremiah Cimmerian, senior member of the Foundation Ethics Committee. Cimmerian extends his hand and tells him that if he'll come with him, they'll get this all straightened out post-haste. Sokolsky then remarks that the rest of them will see how tangled a web they can weave. We're then finally given the description for 8888, an intelligent prediction machine utilized in all non-trivial Foundation endeavors. When a request or query is conveyed to 8888, it ignites an array of arcane engines, artifacts, and computing mechanisms to divine the course of events in which the request is optimally fulfilled. Then, if possible, the machine will answer the inquirer and/or interact with its environment to facilitate that optimal course of events. If, however, it receives conflicting requests, it prioritizes the most recent request first, and may delay or abandon others entirely. No request may override this behavior, and so radical security measures must be maintained to ensure 8888 remains in Foundation control. 8888 can predict, simulate, or compute any data with perfect accuracy, and will always act in accordance with the inquirer's intent. While this functioning can be imitated to some degree by Foundation AI conscript technologies, 8888 fundamentally surpasses all known AI technology in one crucial aspect: it does not express deviance. Meaning that it doesn't develop any sort of tendencies towards unwanted and unprompted behavior, a trait that all other AI tech does have to some degree. This is because that any attempt to communicate one's intent must utilize some form of language, and any language will inherently deviate from intent, invariably allowing for misinterpretation. Any sufficiently general AI technology, therefore, will eventually express some degree of deviance and become maligned. As such, 8888 is not actually AI, it is not digital, and it does not interpret anything. It instead features a fully mechanical construction, comprised of thaumic controllers, enchanted clockwork, quantum foam, and countless other components. The mechanism is precisely crafted to harness diverse metaphysical and esophysical energies, used to perform a multitude of interwoven oculomancy rituals, invoking the mind of a novel, enigmatic intelligence which recursively divines itself into existence. This enables 8888 to physically simulate the inquirer's entire consciousness, thereby meticulously deriving their exact intent, leaving no potential for deviance. The sole exception to this behavior is the hypothetical case of it receiving two contradictory requests, with it attesting that it will always attempt to aid any inquisitor, prioritizing its most recent requests first, and abandoning those with which these are mutually exclusive. Some more technobabble then, but basically 8888 uses a very complicated array of systems to solve problems for the Foundation, better than any AI ever could. It's obviously pretty indispensable then, and since it doesn't have any real loyalty to anyone, just answering whatever requests come its way, it would be pretty catastrophic if someone opposed to the Foundation got a hold of it. Since its invocation, 8888 has regularly provided invaluable insight to Overwatch Command, bolstering the effectiveness of all relevant efforts to secure, contain, and protect. This insight is generated via its Divin-8 protocol. The protocol was proposed by 8888 itself, with the purpose listed of obtaining maximal desired information from 8888 without potentiating its theft. As part of this, 8888 may already predict any and all inquiries it would ever receive. It has hence been instructed to divine and catalog these indefinitely, verifying that all requests will be made by the Foundation, and taking note of when they will be conveyed. By default, 8888 remains sealed within the Pan-Octagon's core room, causally disconnected from consensus reality. In accordance with Foundation objectives, it must preemptively generate information related to incoming queries, such that it has already prepared its responses beforehand. As 052, the archivist, initiates an uplink to the 8-ball database, 8888 will trigger an Invoke-8 event, causing the core room to be momentarily unsealed as 8888 uploads response data to the database the instant it is requested. It will then reseal the core room until the next Invoke-8 event. The Pan-Octagon has been engineered to facilitate this protocol without fault, but adversarial attack data suggests something that has been expunged from the document. In other words, since 8888 can predict every request that will ever be made of it, it has already cataloged all of those requests and come up with responses ahead of time. Then, when a request is made, it very temporarily connects back to consensus reality, sends the response, and disconnects itself again. Because of this, it already knows that all requests that will ever be made of it come from the Foundation, making it pretty damn secure. To date, no noteworthy attempt has been made to compromise 8888, its operation, or its security measures. Until now, of course. In the Council Chamber exclusion lobby at Site-01, Dr. Cimmerian tells Heikaku that he's witnessed worse meetings with the Council, but none where the subject got out with their job intact, congratulating him. Heikaku replies that he's not sure this is necessary, as he's already filed a dozen reports and dealt with 3 different investigative bodies at this point. Cimmerian responds that one more won't hurt, and asks if he can record this interaction for later review. And although Heikaku doubts that an objection from him would be respected in this context, he agrees. Cimmerian asks him about 8888 itself, saying that it's protected by a hex-field Faraday cage. Heikaku says that that's semantically sufficient, if terminologically imprecise, and the documentation includes information relating to its containment procedures. Cimmerian did read through it, but he feels he's missing some of the technical knowledge necessary to fully understand it. Heikaku remarks that there are probably better people to ask about Arcanotech, ones with less urgent schedules, but Cimmerian wants him to give him his best version of it, explaining it as if Cimmerian were an English major, which he is. Heikaku takes a seat and explains that a Faraday cage is meant to keep external electromagnetic signals from entering a location. Hex field enhanced cages keep magical interference from interacting with anomalies as well, meaning that the object should have been invisible to magical and electronic surveillance. Cimmerian asks how those measures were circumvented then, to which Heikaku suggests that the absence of something is almost as notable as its presence, and assumes that some outside force recognized that Something valuable must have been hidden behind their veils. Cimmerian then asks where he was when this theft was being carried out, to which Heikaku says that it's a bit complicated to answer, and he's not wholly sure he's going to understand its complexities. Cimmerian says that their review of the video feed indicates that he somehow has a secret luxury apartment hidden away in the admin wing of Site-15, which of course Heikaku denies, and wonders why it would even be pertinent to this investigation. Cimmerian counters by asking why he couldn't see why the ethics committee would be interested in investigating possible employee malfeasance with regards to the theft of an anomaly. More importantly, after looking through the complete footage of the theft, he's left with a bigger question. Why didn't the alarms sound as soon as the intruders were spotted by the site's security AI? Before Heikaku can respond, Cimmerian's phone goes off, and Heikaku says that he may need to postpone the remainder of this interview, as he has some major operational duties to attend to. Cimmerian says that this will just take 2 minutes to reply to, and he insists that they finish, but Heikaku promises him that he'll reserve the whole afternoon tomorrow to finish. The message that Cimmerian got was from Dr. Sokolsky, who tells him to put a pin in Heikaku's interview, as security will be directing him elsewhere for the moment. Cimmerian replies that he's not going to co-opt his investigation and integrate it into his own, not again. Sokolsky responds that he thought Cimmerian would be happy to help, but Cimmerian says that even if he was, Heikaku is up to something. He just can't nail down exactly what. Regardless, he's gotta be removed, to which Sokolsky agrees, but says that right now the director is useful to them. Cimmerian asks how a corrupt and possibly compromised director is useful, to which Sokolsky just says, "The devil you know," but Cimmerian finishes the phrase with, "is more pleasant than Heikaku." Cimmerian tells him that he's going to have to fight him on this, and thinks that the director is going to be more of a liability than an asset. He has just as much authority as Sokolsky does on this matter, but Sokolsky asks if he wants to run this back to both of their bosses and see what happens, or just let him do his job. They don't have time for a territorial pissing match that they both know he'll win. Cimmerian replies that this is why nobody likes him, and Sokolsky says that when they're done, Cimmerian can report whatever he wants back to the committee, and he'll even co-sign the report, but for now, he needs him. Cimmerian just says to let him know when he's done so that he can do his job, but Sokolsky was serious earlier and tells him to stay on site, as he needs his help with something. In the Hex Field Maintenance Access Tunnel of Site-15, Cimmerian and Sokolsky enter the frame from the far end of the tunnel. A small panel is hanging open, and a technician is already present here, photographing the panel's interior, the floor, and various other related points of interest. Sokolsky nods to the photographer, dismissing him, and Cimmerian asks if this is where they sabotaged the Hex Field. Sokolsky believes so, as they switched out the depleted IntelliWard for a fully charged one, a magical energy source capable of powering various arcanotech utilized in the containment of 8888. Cimmerian says that that's not all though, obviously, and Sokolsky smirks and nods. He says that Cimmerian can see it if he wants, and probably should look, as he's about the height of the second guy, so it can't hurt to check out the scene from his perspective. Cimmerian walks to the panel and leans forward, peering inside, commenting that it looks like the connector feeds are corroded. Sokolsky says that that checks out, as the new one was supposed to be fully charged, but as soon as they slotted it in, it started to drain essence from every connected arcane battery at the site. Feeds aren't supposed to work that way, so they're probably junked. Cimmerian asks if he's considered checking what flavor the IntelliWard is, and Sokolsky asks what he means. It's something Cimmerian picked up in Russia, as the GRU have various classifications for magics based on who practices that particular brand. Basically, if this came from the outside, there's probably a way to find out who cast the binding spells. Sokolsky replies that he thinks he knows someone who can handle that, but it's going to cost them. He stands there silently for a few moments before Cimmerian comments that he has to actually say what he's thinking. Sokolsky apologizes and says that he thinks it's time he made a deal with the devil, and begins walking off. Cimmerian follows him, repeatedly asking what exactly that means. We're next given the origin of SCP-8888, and although it's the apex of myriad scrying, soothsaying, and prophetic efforts spanning all recorded human civilization, its essential innovations are inspired in part by another ancient analog computer, the Enigma. In early 1900, a Foundation precursor agency, the Foundation for the Anomalous, was made aware of abnormal phenomena on the western coast of Crete, an island state recently made autonomous under Prince George of Greece and Denmark. Operatives investigated, discovering that strange aquatic machinery had been washing up on the shores of the Aegean near an island there. Said devices were advanced clockwork automata constructed from seafloor minerals, rotting wood, and bones. Further research revealed that this activity had been occurring for decades, but had been kept hidden by a heretical sect of Mechanite prophets. This information only surfaced during a period of rapid occupations and departures from Crete in the year preceding its reunification with Greece. Ancient texts uncovered by the Department of Historioglyphics suggests a similar society had operated in Delphi in approximately 1400 BC, but subsequently reduced to a small membership in Crete. The prophets had attempted limited diving operations over many years, but since they all possessed heavy and rust-prone augmentations, they were incapable of wide-scale recovery. In the following months, numerous diving crews were sighted off the shores of Crete, with surveillance suggesting nothing of note was recovered by any party until April of 1901, when agents of the precursor group to Marshall, Carter, and Dark were observed retrieving a substantial mass of rusted metal from the sea. Covert personnel reported that the item was transferred to Athens' National Museum of Archaeology. Days later, the group invited select members of the United Occult Trust, the precursor to the GOC's council, to a private auction of rare and paranatural items hosted in Athens. The Foundation attended and bid aggressively, but was outbid on the target item by an unidentified representative of the Broken Church, with neither the representative nor the item being located afterwards. After securing additional funding, the Foundation contacted the Broken Church and again offered to purchase the item. Unexpectedly, they accepted, but what was received was determined to be a non-anomalous, heavily damaged mechanical device possessing no paranatural attributes. This wreckage appears to represent a significant proportion of an analog astronomical calendar. After a fruitless program of intensive research, the item was donated to the Athenian Museum to assist disinformation efforts regarding the presence of occult phenomena in ancient Greece. In August of 1931, the actual target item was finally recovered following a raid on an MC&D research facility in England, where its core engines had apparently been fully disassembled and analyzed. Various similar experimental mechanical apparati were also collected for study, but whether or not MC&D gleaned any insight or innovations from these efforts remains unclear. Foundation researchers termed the device Enigma in early 1932. While the extent of the original mechanism remains unknown, it is clear that the Enigma was a mechanical prediction and translation machine constructed by ancient Greek, likely Mechanite, engineers. It engaged a precise admixture of oracular and occult divination practices, and while the true mechanism was likely similar in function to the replica now held in the museum, it would have been substantially more accurate and versatile in predicting arbitrary events. Upon further research, it was discovered that this precise confluence of arcane phenomena facilitated an anomalous form of mechanical data preservation, then termed enigmatization. This precise concoction of thaumatonarrative and cryptomantic rituals is extremely challenging to induce mechanically, and so was generally considered impractical. In some rare circumstances, however, the Foundation has developed related technologies, including the World War II-era Enigma graph encryption engines. Developed under Operation Paperclip, the enigmatic telegraphs were designed to create anti-memetically encrypted messages decipherable only by their intended recipients. They were also inexplicably effective in decrypting a wide variety of esoteric communications, and were essential to the formation of the early department of miscommunications. Decades later, as the Foundation sought to further digitize its records and computing technologies, the Information Technology Department was formed to manage and develop more efficient data manipulation technologies. One experimental approach was Project Rosetta, an effort to derive an intelligent digital agent from the outdated, decommissioned Enigma graphs. This project resulted in the creation of the first artificially intelligent conscript framework, 8B-A1, known as 8-Ball. Two successive discoveries in the field of artificial intelligence resulted in the present paradigm, that AI frameworks not derived from Enigma inevitably produce the undesirable behavior termed deviance at some point, and that frameworks derived from it do not. Subsequent to incident Clock Multiplier, core elements of 8-Ball have been integrated into all Foundation AICs by Overwatch Command. A Priority 1 research and development project by the Artificial Intelligence Applications Division in 2001 produced the first artificial general intelligence, the distinction involving said intelligence's possession of intellectual autonomy, self-conception, and progressive self-directed evolution. The first autonomous act of this intelligence was the design and construction of SCP-8888. So, we have a device that is extremely instrumental to the Foundation's operations, a device that quite likely is the most difficult thing someone could ever hope to steal from the Foundation, and by all accounts, shouldn't have ever been capable of being stolen. It, of course, gets stolen under Director Heikaku's watch, and now Dr. Sokolsky is put in charge of getting it back. To do so, he's going to have to put a team together and track it down. Likely a pretty difficult task, considering the thieves have access to an omniscient problem-solving device. There's no doubt that plenty of twists and turns are going to occur, and we're still left in the dark as to who exactly stole the device, with no shortage of suspects. We'll pick things up then in Part 2, as Sokolsky assembles his team and begins looking deeper into this impossible heist.